Computer. So, welcome everyone. My name's Dan Latterman. I'm the co-director of Living Light and also the president of the Institute for Vibrant Living, the organizations that are bringing this expo. And I have the pleasure this morning, about noontime, I guess this afternoon, to introduce Dr. Brian Clement. I had the opportunity 11 years ago to go to Hippocrates in West Palm Beach, the Hippocrates Institute, and spent 9 weeks doing the Health Educated program. At that point, I had been raw for about 3 years, and that basically just finished me off. Basically, what I learned at Hippocrates and the miracles I saw, the work they were doing, convinced me that instead of going back into the high-tech world of Silicon Valley, I had to carry on a mission similar to what Hippocrates was doing, which was educating the world about the health and vitality and possibilities that were available on this type of a lifestyle. And so I went back and left the high-tech world, kind of. Seemed to keep drawing back into it. But started the Institute for Vibrant Living and started putting on events like this. We had our first expo in '99, but a lot of that was all based on the extra enthusiasm and things that I learned when I was at Hippocrates. And Brian does that all over the world. Dr. Clement lectures to audiences about worldwide on how to create health and obtain longevity. And they have a beautiful center in West Palm Beach, and I'm really honored to have Brian here today. And I'll let him start talking since we're already running a little late, and he's got a lot of good things to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
It's always a pleasure to come out here with Sherry and Dan and support what they're doing. They're doing very important work, and we may speak about the backbone and the theory and the science, but unless it's available for people as they make it here and train chefs all over the world, it doesn't go to step 2. So let's congratulate Sherry and Dan for what they do. Today I was going to focus in on supplementation, which is a very interesting subject for a lot of you. Yesterday I alluded to it, but we're going to be very focused and clear today. That there are many among the so-called authorities in raw and living food that improperly and incorrectly make very bad statements like, you don't need supplements if you're eating a raw food diet. Now, why that's a bad statement versus my view of reality, oh, thank God, he got it up there, is because we've been doing clinical research on humans now for over half a century. And we've been observing not only when guests arrive at Hippocrates and depart Hippocrates, their blood profile and nutritional supplementation, but we also observe them after they're home. Months and years go by, decades go by, and we still collect information and data on all of these people. What we have found unanimously, that means 100%, even the most healthy among us, including myself, at times, as rare as it may be, lack some vital nutrient. And it's not because we're missing that in our food, it's because of the exceptional amount of activity that the modern human is involved with versus a person 100 years ago or 50 years ago. Now, if you look at the differentials, we are in a high-speed world, high-paced world. As one small example to you, it's only recent years that we realize from all the brilliant neuron research that's going on that we have about 95 trillion cells in our entire body. But listen to this, 85 trillion of those cells are in the human brain. Now, the other scary part of what has become a revelation to us in neuron research is that the average person uses 3 or 4% of our brain. So this gives valid reasoning why we still have war, racism, hatred, sexism, and all the craziness that goes on. Because we are all unconscious. Even those that are among us who believe we spend a lot of time becoming conscious, it's really a joke. Because we're using fractional parts of our brain. 96, 97% of our brain is not being used. In spite of that, go back to what I said 2 minutes ago, that we have most of the cells, 8.5 times more cells in the small organ we call the brain than from the neck down, which has 10 million, 85. 10 trillion, 85 trillion. With that said, does that mean that 96 or 97% of activity is still going on in the brain, but we are unconscious about it? Now let's flip back to 6.5 minutes ago when I started and say to you, listen, what we've got to remember, this. We've got to remember that even though we are not conscious of what's going on, with the stimuli we have in modern life today, we are expelling exceptional and extraordinary amounts of energy like no other human has in history before. You are being stimulated 24 hours a day. The other night I had a privilege and pleasure to visit one of the potential locations. We're going to begin Hippocrates programs periodically on the West Coast. Our first is going to be actually in Malibu this February, March, and May. We're going to do one-week programs overlooking the Pacific Ocean in a Catholic retreat that's remarkably beautiful there. And we'll be moving them up to the northern part periodically and more. But here I was in the middle of the forest outside of Santa Cruz. And even in Florida where I live, that seemingly is quiet compared to most places, it was dead quiet there. And what came to my recognition and understanding at that point is this is how everyone had it in my great-grandmom's generation and great-grandpop's generation. There were no automobiles, there were no airplanes, there were no television, no radio. None of this existed. And so we had ourselves. We couldn't divert our attention and become minute thinkers because we had to be embellished by and embraced by the environment around us. So even though today we purport that we're smarter because we've made, quote, advancements in modern science, I'm not quite sure we're smarter today. I even suspect that we've lost awareness and lost consciousness. Because that connectiveness with nature and all else beyond ourselves is something that made us larger and bigger, not smaller because we didn't have advancements. Do you follow that? Usually science, which is self-promoting, because who propel science are corporations to produce products that you buy, they always embellish it and pat themselves on the back and say, look at how wonderful we are, we're good, and we're making your life easier. How many of you are old enough to remember the 50s and 60s when we had that little buzz term? What was it about science we had? Better living through chemistry. Boy, oh boy, have we had better living through chemistry? Well, I'm going to tell you. The same point we also told everyone by the year 2000, everyone's going to work 20 hours and robots are going to run everything. You know what really happened? We added an extra 20 hours. There are no robots. We became the robots. So they were really right, weren't they, in that way? Because after you work 40 hours, you become robotic for the next 20 hours after that. So all of this was happening, and one big leg of the modern science community started to look opportunistically at health. They realized with the Industrial Revolution geared up, and then the information age coming right after megatrends in 1992, reported that we were becoming stressed and detached and out of touch and away from nature, so we needed to feel we had some semblance of health. So they were going to give it to us in a bottle. And they were going to tell you that this was natural. Everything was really natural that they were giving you. And you all bought it hook and sinker because you said, well, gee, I'm so busy, I'm going to a fast food place, I don't have time to exercise, so at least, I can take pills that are natural. And then they created a monstrously complicated portrayal of what nutrients are and supplements are, and literally embellished and made all of this stuff and speculated left and right, and they have no background to prove any of this. But the truth of the matter is, it has now become a multi-billion-dollar industry. So we're going to go back and we're going to speak a little bit now about the history of all of this stuff and how it works for you. Science has never successfully created an apple from scratch in a laboratory. Only nature has proven its ability to produce apples. As the scientist Carl Sagan once aptly put it, if you want to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first create the universe. Isn't that brilliant? I'm going to use that. I mean, that is brilliant stuff. You know, we always think, we know everything. That's because we're so damn insecure, we have to make believe we know everything. because we realize we know nothing when it comes right down to it. Under current law, a vitamin marketed as natural only has to contain 10% of genuinely natural plant-derived ingredients. That means 90% can be what it is, by the way, pure chemicals. Pure, absolute, unadulterated chemicals. The other 90% ingredients can be synthetic for the manufacturers to make this deceptive claim. If a product contains even one carbon atom, it can legally be called 100% organic. Aha, how do you like that one? They've even screwed you on the organic stuff. And look, all you need is what? One carbon of, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Your body knows the difference, even though synthetics are designed to try and trick it. Natural nutrients are absorbed readily because we are biologically programmed to recognize the natural occurring compounds as genuine nutrients. 3 years ago, a colleague of mine here in California and one in Quebec, Canada, formed a new nonprofit organization. We hope it will advance this whole issue. It's called NOS, Natural Occurring Standards. And we hope in the future this will be the good housekeeping seal, a little gold seal that we put NOS on bottles so you'll know what is a whole food, organic, derived supplement versus the 92% on the market that are chemical supplements. Synthetic vitamins manufacturers want you to believe there is no difference between synthetic and natural products because the synthetics are cheaper to produce and thus carry a much higher profit margin. For instance, I carry a small line that I create either because they're not available on the market or they're highly expensive on the market, and I, like you, have to buy these and don't want that to happen. For instance, I have Sun Chlorella Company make our chlorella, and we charge you 2.5 times less because it doesn't have the Sun Chlorella on it. But what I've learned is that every year the products that a whole food supplement manufacturer creates cost more money because it always means you have to go back with human hands to nature and constantly with human hands gently process so you don't kill or damage the nutrient factors in it. Whereas if you have a synthetic, one example, ascorbic acid, once you formulate that, from that point forward, it's always inexpensive because it takes very, very inexpensive elements and compounds to create it. Nature gave us a promise. It was a promise of good health and long life if we use its nutrients wisely as our medicine. Now, it's ironic we created the fields of medicine because the truth of the matter is, the father of Western medicine, what was his big statement? Let food be thy medicine, medicine be thy food. Ironically, every single June, every single late May, medical students around the world get up and take the Hippocrates oath. And the second thing they always say is, I'll do no harm. Oy. We won't talk about that. While our knowledge and awareness of vitamins as important nutrients came about relatively recently, most of the ancient healing traditions dating back 5,000 years demonstrated some recognition that certain herbs and plants contained an invisible substance with an energy or life force that could be reverse serious health conditions. The following slides offer a brief history of supplements. And we're going to go through this rapidly because we have a lot to cover in a very short period of time. Ancient cultures understood the principle that a life force within the foods of nature could maintain human health and even restore it. Our understanding of this principle took a quantum leap forward in 1747 when a Scottish naval surgeon, Clement, discovered that an unknown substance in lemon, limes, and several other fruits and vegetables prevented scurvy, which was a serious problem for sailors of that period. This nutrient would eventually become identified as vitamin C. And do you know how prevalent that disease was? I was surprised when I was doing the research on this book will be out in October, to know that when sailors went out, why they were one of the highest paid group of people at that point in history, that they knew that 50% would die on the cruise. Isn't that amazing? So 50% of them would die and literally be thrown overboard. What a shocker that one is. And so this lint ended up realizing that, lemons and limes were good, but they rotted after a while. So you know what they ended up getting vitamin C from? Chickpea sprouts, garbanzo bean sprouts. That inevitably became where they ended up getting that, because they could take them and sprout them in 2 days and have vitamin C forever, for years if they went on cruises. This is a big, lovely guy who also created a lot of problem. In the 1860s, Pasteur demonstrated that many diseases were linked to microscopic organisms. Now, boy, was he right, and boy, did he help us a lot in medicine. Because do you realize before that, when they did surgery on people, they'd be picking their nose, digging dirt, and go in, and he would say, oh, wait a minute, you're going to put a disease into their body. And he'd say, oh, no way, that's not going to happen. And he was right about that. But what happened around the same time, the emerging new field that we today call allopathic medicine. You know them as medical doctors were starting. And what they did is they bought Pasteur theory, hook and sinker, 100%. And even today, 150 years later, think of this, 150 years later, the way that mainstream Western medicine deals with disease is let's kill everything because everything's a microbe. Isn't that amazing? Look at cancer. It's insane what people have cancer. We literally take radioactivity that we wouldn't put our worst enemy in, and literally at every hospital around the world expose people to that. Get it to a point where their immune system drops such a devastating amount that they may die from some opportunistic other disease. And what do they say? This is the best we can do. Why? It goes back to Pasteur, who didn't mean that lunacy should be happening, but that's where Western medicine took its lead in this way. There's so many things that really we could correct and improve and eliminate just purely by building the body up. Soon after, the concept of infection caused by germs became the basics of Western theory of medicine and disease. At this time, beriberi and pellagra were believed to be infectious diseases. Now think about that. And by the way, these diseases are now becoming prevalent again. These are diseases that didn't exist for a long time, but because we're eating out of fast food restaurants and not eating enough and not eating well, we're getting back the obvious nutritional diseases. The less obvious nutritional diseases are all the catastrophic diseases, starting with cancer. Even the United States government, which hardly ever tells the truth on any issue, basically told us about 15 or 20 years ago that cancer is a preventable disease in 75% of the cases, since it's lifestyle choices, mostly depending upon what people eat. Now think about that. They even say it. Cardiovascular disease, I think 98% are lifestyle choices. Heart attacks and strokes. Still killing about 48% of Americans. So half of us will die from a heart attack or stroke, and it's the fat and the garbage and the chemicals that we eat. Fletcher, an English doctor, discovered the effect the vitamins had upon humans, and around 1905 with the studies that he conducted. Fletcher experiments proved his theory. There are special nutrients contained in the husk of rice that could prevent beriberi. And this led to the discovery of B1, thiamine, and other B vitamins. Now, he was the very first guy that named something and basically said, this is it, this is a vitamin. And look at this, it's only 1905. And a lot of you just somehow assumed that these things have been around forever. And we are all in a learning curve. Funk at the Lister Institute in 1912, he went and he looked there and he started to discover the next steps. Funk coined the term vitamin, which he defined as an important substance in food that are vital for life. Vita, meaning life, and amine, from nitrogen compounds found in the thiamine. So now you know where the word vitamin comes from. I'll leave that up there for a minute so you can write that down. Pretty intelligent guy, huh? Vita meaning life, and nitrogen. And as you know, nitrogen provokes the growth and development of all life. Unfortunately, after the Second World War, when they were using nitrogen to create bombs to kill people, they had nothing to do with that after the war, so they said, let's put nitrogen on our crops. And it provoked life. What it does is make crops grow even in soil that has no nutrition in it. But it does the same thing. It makes you grow. So the pure form of nitrogen is a good thing in small amounts, not the way we've used it now in modern science. In 12, vitamin C was rediscovered and identified by Norwegians Hoist and Froelich. And in 1935, it became the first vitamin to be synthesized. So now we're telling you the first chemical supplement was created in 1935. Were any of you born in 1935 or after? See that? We weren't even around at that point. Artificially synthesized by a process invented by Richstein of the Swiss Institute of Technology in Zurich. 22, the University of California, Evans and Bishop discovered vitamin E in green leafy vegetables. As a matter of fact, study after study I've been reading over the last 40 years of my work show that vitamin E from green vegetables in its whole food form works far more effectively than anticoagulant drugs. As a matter of fact, there's never been a study done on that that didn't show that. That better than what? Coumadin, Lipitor is vitamin E from green leafy vegetables. Or better than that, eating what? Green leafy vegetables. It acts to protect our cells against the effect of free radicals. Whoa. Now, free radicals are how we get sick and old. You know, when you smoke a cigarette, it doesn't give you cancer, it gives you free radicals. When you're negative and start to push out all that adrenaline, it doesn't get you sick, it gives you free radicals. And every way we get sick or age prematurely is free radicals. And the number one way to protect it, we've known solidly since 1922, is the consumption of green leafy vegetables. And for the last 53 years, Hippocrates has proven that with 250,000 people, bringing people back to life from ungodly catastrophic disease with green leafy vegetables. Smith and Hendricks discovered B2, also known as riboflavin, in 1926. You see? And here we go, 32, and they later known as absorbic acid. That's what they discovered in glands as ronic acid. At around the same time, they isolated from lemons and showed that it was nearly identical to hexronic acid, and that was vitamin C. 28, recognizing nutrition as a newly emerging area, the American biochemist and physiologist formed the world's first scientific society focused on nutrition. So here in the United States in 28, we created the first valid scientific community surrounding nutritional science. Of all of its founding members were actively engaged in teaching and writing textbooks and academic articles, defining the new disciplines, and their new nutrition society brought much attention to the use of vitamins. Named the American Institute of Nutrition later. 33, Osborne at Yale, which we do not consider a human food, discovered that milk had natural growth hormones. But again, humans should not be consuming milk to create a calf into a 1,000-pound creature. I mean, it's insane how dumb we all are. 33, a scientist working for the pharmaceutical corporation, now called Roche. That's what it should be called. Succeeded at making synthetic vitamin C and isolated absorbic acid. This is the big seller. Boy, have they convinced you that vitamin C is important. And do you realize that there's no real definitive study that shows that vitamin C does help you with common colds? Do you know that? Because all of the work that was done by Pauling, who was brilliant and wonderful and extraordinary, was speculation. And even the day that I met Pauling, when we were with Dr. Arthur Robinson, the young Phi Beta Kappa student of his out of Stanford University, I breached that subject with Pauling. I said, was it a definitive research finalization that you made? And he said, absolutely not. This was a synopsis and theories that we had gathered together. Whereas now we've learned over the last 25 years that zinc not only prevents common colds, but also if you have one, reduces it by 1/3 of the time. 3-day cold becomes what? A 2-day cold. A 6-day cold becomes a 4-day cold. So you heard what I just said. Zinc is what you have to be worrying about and thinking about. But vitamin C is important, very important. As way back in 1700s, Lund realized chickpeas, when you sprout them, have tons of vitamin C in it. Cow's milk was found to contain growth-promoting factors which include water-soluble B family. Now, this is where we invented the B family. We thought before it was just one. Now we realized it was a gathering. Improperly, B12 was put into the B category. It is not a B vitamin. It is a probiotic. It's a soil-based microorganism, a good, healthy bacteria. But they didn't know what a probiotic was then, improperly put it into the B category. In the 30s, a flurry of scientific discoveries demonstrated biochemical functions of various vitamins and established the body's requirements for them. Since then, forms of vitamins have been widely available in thousands of processed foods, produced on a massive commercial scale. Now, this is really insane. What we did is we all started to look at the aristocracy, the kings and the queens and the princesses and the princess. What they learned hundreds and hundreds of years ago, the people who worked for them, is if they denatured grains and denatured sugars and things, that the rats and the bugs would not go after it. So it became the food of the kings and queens and the aristocracy. White flour, white this, white that. So they would sit in a room where they stored things, whole grains, and basically let the rats eat them, because the rats were smarter than you and I. They wouldn't eat the denatured grains. But now we started to all think we were fancy because we had this newfound money in a new economy. The middle class was growing here in this country. And we, by the way, created the middle class, viable middle class in the world. That's what made America so popular for immigrants. Most of our families coming here. All of our families. I don't see any Native Americans here. And so what they did is they all wanted white this, white that, white that. But then the government realized there was massive, massive problems. Disease rates were plummeting and going crazy like this. And so what we actually had to do is start to put laws together to fortify unknowingly and unwittingly with chemical supplements the whole grains that we've denatured now. Isn't that weird? Convoluted stupidity, but that's the way everything's generally done. He discovered B6 in 34. American discovered in B3 in 37. Synthetic vitamins are fortified into many of our bread, cereals, and other grain products, as well as many dairy products, drinks, and desserts. In fact, it is nearly impossible to find any fortified food product that does not contain some form of synthetic supplements. Even if you and I purport today that we're enlightened, guess what? We were brought up, because all of us are young enough here, from the time we were born with synthetic supplements in our diet. Isn't that shocking? And I'll never forget, when I was young, we used to be able to buy 5 loaves of giant bread called Wonder Bread for $1. 5 giant, you have to carry it out with 2 people. And it was white as white can be, snow white as we say, fortified with all the chemical supplements. And I remember my mom, who knew nothing about nutrition. Her idea was, if it doesn't taste good, don't eat it. And basically, I remember her reading to me one day, you've got to eat more of this bread because it has whatever it was in there. 38 to 47, industrial synthetics of vitamin A, B group, vitamin E, and vitamin K. Industrial synthetics of vitamin A, B1, B2, E, and vitamin K1 is mastered for commercial production. So look what they did. The health food stores that began proliferating in the 1940s and 50s carried the synthetic vitamins and vitamin formulas. Guess what? They still do. Your best health stores, most of what's on their shelf, if not all of what's on their shelf, is purely chemical. 52, vitamin products, including supplements derived from synthetic vitamin ingredients, became common as more people became educated about vitamins and they became relatively affordable. Before that, it was a handful of the elite that were taking these things. Another milestone occurred in 54. This was a big, big, big one. Denham Harmon, MD, PhD, and Professor Emrys at Nebraska Medical School conceived the free radical theory of aging and the link between antioxidants such as C and E and their ability to neutralize free radicals and extend life. Now let me preface this because we don't have a lot of time. The only antioxidants that I consider are superhero antioxidants are zeolites, CoQ10, and alpha-lipoic acid. Zeolites, CoQ10, alpha-lipoic acid. But I can say to you that these other nutrients in their whole food form are helpful, but compared to those 3, marginal, compared to those 3. 56, published his concept of biochemicals and nutritional individuality. Linus Pauling agreed with this idea, and in 68 described the theological foundation for nutritional medicine. Now, Pauling, I just learned a lot about him in a meeting I had at Oregon State University, the guy who heads up their Linus Pauling Center there. What was remarkable is Pauling was in college when he was 15 years old. And his dad died, and his mom said, "You've got to come back and support the family." And he had 1 year left of school. And the professor says, "Oh, no, that can't happen." And they had to find a way so that he could afford to go to school and pay him so he could send money home to his mom and his brothers and sisters. You know what they did? At 17 years old, they made him the professor. So he was teaching in his third year and fourth year of university, teaching freshmen, sophomores, and juniors, his peers and his colleagues. And this guy was more brilliant than you can imagine. Brilliant, brilliant, and a wonderful guy, too. He was one of those few people I ever met in my life that had as much personality as he has genius. Most of the time when they have genius, they have zero personality. He was a different character. While this early scientific community made many valuable contributions in understanding the role of individual vitamins in health, the process of identifying and isolating vitamins led to an incorrect assumption, now shared by the majority of nutritional scientists, that vitamins are as effective and health-promoting in their isolated state as in their natural whole food state. That was the schism. That was where the disparity started. Major problem. Quantum science has provided data demonstrating that multitudes of cofactors exist within and around these vital nutritional structures. Remember yesterday I spoke about minerals and how there's little fairies floating around at the bottom? They're one of the many, God knows how many we haven't seen yet, cofactors. These microscopic and often invisible factors may be as nutritionally important as a vitamin itself. Because this is a brand new science we're all just learning. Even at the most basic level, vitamins and minerals will never perform fully without their cofactors. This is why isolated man-made chemical supplements do not provide the nutrition that the body requires, but does in fact weaken your immune system and promote and prolong and attract disease. While the scientists meant well, they did not realize that their focus and work would help create a flawed foundation. Remember those two words. That's what we're based on. It's a very flawed foundation upon which the field of nutritional science is built. That's why Hippocrates and others are out to recreate nutritional understanding, biological sciences, and frequency medicines. We will achieve it. Misconcept number one, food contains all the vitamins you need. The first United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, known as the Earth Summit, held in Brazil, that meeting of 108 heads of state was presented with a document prepared by agricultural experts showing the extent to which nutrients have been removed from crop soils worldwide. The estimates were far worse than anyone had previously suspected. Yesterday we spoke about that. We said to you what? We said, hey, we don't care if you're eating organic food. Most of it is grown on non-rich soil. We have a gentleman over here. Go and listen to him. That's a soil-based science guy. What he's doing is the most important work any of us are doing. Because what he's saying is we don't get nutrition in the soil. Who cares what we're eating? You've got to feed the food before the food feeds you. During the 20th century, according to this report, about 85% of all nutrients have been depleted from the crop soils of North America. Now, you sit there not shocked about that. That should jump you off the chair and you should be pissed off as hell. 85% of the nutrition has come out of the crops. So you talk about a mistake. That's a major mistake. Asia and South America lost 76%, Africa 74%, and Europe experienced 72%. Now, by the way, this was before. It's worse now. At least 90% of these depleted nutrients are considered essential to human health. Only 27% of adults, based on a sampling of 305,000 adults, eat vegetables in large enough quantities each day to absorb any of the vitamins and minerals that help to guard the body against chronic illness and disease. Now, by the way, this was the largest meeting ever held by all the heads of, our president was there, by the way, at this one, and they literally were getting the information you're getting now, where they literally said that we're not nourishing the population, guard the body against chronic illness and disease. So this isn't something that holistic types sitting here on the coastline of the Pacific Ocean in Northern California know about. This is something the heads of the world's leading countries know about. But are they acting upon it? No way. Many medical experts are beginning to speak out in the strongest possible terms about the benefits of supplementation. We now have a substantial body of data showing that if everyone took few supplements every day, they could significantly lower their risk of multiples of serious disease. Think about that. These are things we know. Everyone knows. There's not a legitimate biological scientist today that doesn't know this. Harvard University studied authors show that vitamins and mineral deficiency in our diet put us at a risk for cancer, heart disease, and a wide range of other health problems. I read these studies. You should see them. They're hard-hitting. These aren't sissy-wuss studies. These are saying basically, because you're not eating correctly, you're going to get cancer. And here's how you're going to get cancer, and here are the pathways how you're going to get cancer. And by the way, I challenge anyone to show us that this isn't true. That's what these studies read. Where are they published? The New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, the British Journal of Medicine, the Swedish Journal of Medicine. That's where I'm reading them, not in some holistic journal. In the 40s, Schutt, a medical doctor from Canada, and Gurdjieff's idea about vitamin therapy into practice, Schutt and his colleagues used large doses of synthetic vitamin E to treat patients with a variety of cardiovascular disease. Clement, MD, from North Carolina, began treating a variety of viral diseases, including polio, with some limited success using large doses of synthetic vitamin C. If they had taken the protocol of whole food vitamin C, the results would have been significantly better. Now, we don't have time to do much else. We have about 5 minutes, so I'll try to answer a few questions in that 5 minutes before we move on. Anyone over this side? Yes. Stand up and...
I just wanted to comment that in Africa, countries that have depleted selenium in their soil have a much higher rate of AIDS. That the countries that have a good amount of selenium are not suffering AIDS.
That's a factual statement. And selenium is a pro-immunity nutrient. By the way, it's not only Africans that are depleted in that. Most Americans do not have selenium. Yes?
You said CoQ10, zeolite, so what was the third one? Alpha what?
The three strongest, the superheroes, as I call them, of antioxidants are zeolite, CoQ10, in an ubiquinol state. We make one with a veg cap. We're the only ones in the world that make one with a vegetable cap. Everything else is the guts of an animal or the brains of an animal. And the last one is alpha-lipoic acid. Yes?
You mentioned that they're publishing, like the FDA publishing studies saying that cancer is caused by...
Not the FDA, love. No.
Okay, what is it?
Universities.
Okay,
Yes.
they're publishing that it's a lack of certain nutrients, but it is also undigested hormones and undigested chemicals that are putting in the food now that's really causing the cancer. Like you're talking about in the 40s when they were discovering all these synthetic vitamins, at the same time they discovered that synthetic versions of hormones gave women breast cancer, and then they started putting it in everything and finding new ways to market it to women because people are getting rich off of it.
Well, let me repeat what you're saying because we have limited time. What you've actually said, and I'll repeat it verbatim just in a more concise way, is yes, it is not only nutritional deficiencies, which is a big part of it, because if your body's cells are not strong, that means your organs, your bones are not strong, so you're more vulnerable. So disease, microbes, and mutagens, cancers can attack and win. The second thing you said is that the so-called foods that most of us consume today also have chemicals in it. Fungicides, herbicides, pesticides, etc. All of them are putting synthetic forms of hormones in that whack out cell structure, communication. So what you have is drunk cells that are running all over the place, banging into one another and creating tumors and leukemia and everything else. And that's absolutely a correct assumption in both cases. Yes?
Do you feel that we need to take extra enzymes?
Well, I take 20 enzymes a day for anti-aging. And I think in the first 3 years that anyone moves into the consumption of a raw food diet, you ought to be taking enzymes. And if you're not, you're being silly. Because you're going to get, well, again, there's several on the market. None are bad. Let's start with that. There's only 2 companies that make all of our enzymes. Victoris and I formulated the strongest digestive enzyme on the market. It's called high HHI zyme. But there are other good ones. I don't know of a bad one, to be honest with you, except the ones they make from animal hormones. High zyme, Z-Y-M-E. Yes?
So you mentioned why we should be taking the synthetic ones, and in our foods don't give us all the vitamins and minerals we need. Where should we get vitamins and minerals we need?
Okay, from whole food varieties of supplementation. We only had 40 minutes. This is extensive. It gets right into that, what to take, etc. Now, with that said, you have to be cautious. The best one on the market now is just brand new. It comes out of Garden of Life, and it's called Vitamin Code. Vitamin Code's a great supplement. He is not completely conscious, so he has some, not many, that have animal in it. So you've got to watch that. Again, Hippocrates has a line called Life Give. And E3 Live that's here, remarkable. For moral vegans, they would take flower pollen, which is collected by hand. But bee pollen, which is less moral because it injures the bee, literally also is shockingly high in nutrition. Then there's targeted supplements, as I just pointed out, if you're a common cold sufferer or if you just want your immune system to be stronger. Zinc. The best forms of zinc are liquid forms of zinc, not the ones you get. For instance, calcium's on the market. 90% of them on the market are made from oyster shells, which are 100% undigestible, and worse than that, chalk, which is cancer-causing. Not digestible, zero digestibility with it. And so, yes, do we need calcium? Yes, but we need strontium more than we need calcium. And if you're talking about bones, you need silica as much as you need strontium. Okay, anyone over on this side? Yes?
Do you like the Biosyn Laboratories line?
Biosyn is partly a chemical. Innate Response, I'm not familiar with that company. Yeah. That's one of their... Yeah. Again, it's what they do, so you understand there's 2 ways to create whole food supplements. One, they take a culture, a bacterial culture, put chemical supplements into it, and grow it. The purest forms, the NOS forms, is we extract, without heating above 90 degrees or so, elements and put it into a whole food supplementation. That's more the new vitamin code method that's out there today. It's a very patented code. Yes?
What do you think about angstrom minerals?
Angstrom is good. I think that there's a lot more discussion than science behind them. But yes, there's absolutely a lot of good with them. Angstrom is absorbable into the cell. They're submicroscopic, as we call it, so it can be uptaken into the cell much easier than larger structure cells. Yes?
What's your book coming out?
This is coming out in October. It's called Supplements Exposed. And we hope to God it just rips apart the fraud we call the supplement industry today. Yes?
I read someplace that in the 1930s, wheatgrass was approved by the AMA as a complete nutrition supplement.
When I was helping Ann Wigmore write one of her books called The Hippocrates Diet and Health Program, I had a lot of time at that point in my life, and I was in the Harvard Medical Library. And I was stunned to find the extraordinary research done on chlorophyll. I mean, it was just, I couldn't read it all. And book after book, study after study. And some of it was out of Harvard, some was out of, Yale University, Oxford University. They were showing chlorophyll took care of everything from burns to tumors. But what happened, this is interesting. This all went on in the late 1930s, mid to late 1930s. They got all excited about it, said, whoa, this is phenomenal. We're going to put chlorophyll on the market. They processed it, put it on the market. It went on and off the market in 2.5 to 3 years. Why? It didn't work. Why was it working in the laboratory but not working in the bottle that the people bought at the pharmacy? Yes, it was live. So they were literally extracting live chlorophyll using it. Now somebody somehow, they couldn't have all been that dumb, probably got that. But if it's not valid in the marketplace, what good is it to sell? Yes?
Do you have any resource pages where you list which vitamins, minerals, etc. you recommend with brands?
Well, in my book, Life Force, and in my book, Living Food for Optimum Health, that both are up there at the store, we do that. The book that will come out hopefully by the end of next year, the scientific book, is literally going to be a book for eggheads, as I call it. It's going to have 100% science in it, basically validating, going back so you could look at the whole study that we extracted things from. This one will have a lot of substantiation behind it, but it doesn't give specific. This is to bang the hell out of the supplement industry. Yes?
I take care of E3 Live,
Right.
okay? Will that have enough B12 in it?
No. No. We used to all think that there was adequate amounts of B12 in things like algae, things like uncooked tempeh, and Hippocrates was the only organization that I knew of in the history of man that did long-term studies on B12. And we found people with blood tests, listen closely, with blood tests on the Hippocrates diet literally or virtually didn't have B12 deficiencies. We didn't find it. We had our first gathering of living food leaders about 5-6 years ago. Do you all know about these gatherings? Victoris and I were in 6 or 7 years ago in Wales with a large living food gathering of 400 or 500 people. And the last day we all sat on the stage, and the first 3 questions were the same. I came here to learn how to do raw food, and what I did is I heard you say this, she say that, they said this, and this one didn't say anything. So Victoris and I basically stood up and said, that's the end. No more egocentric stupidity here. We're going to start to get together as leaders and speak with one clear voice. And so we've had 3 living food leader summits. Last one was May. Many of the people that are here basically were there. We had that meeting, and sitting next to me in the first one was Gabriel on this side and George Malcolmus on this side. They said, read the Framingham study. Framingham study on urine testing saw 40% of the population with B12. Subsequent to that, I've done 3.5 years of studies with SpectraCell, a definitive blood test where you take the leukocyte white, open it up, see what's absorbed. Now we realize 65% of the population has a B12 deficiency. And when we were getting positive readings on the blood test, in some of those people, not all, but some of them, they had deficiencies when we did a different form of blood test. Okay, we're going to have to clear out now. I hope to see you. We're going to have a panel.